Greetings, my name's Mike Turoff. This is August 22nd, 2014. We're at the PIA meeting in Denver, Colorado, and one of the reasons why I'm here is I am on the staff for the PIA as their audiovisual person, and I'm also a representative to the U.S. Parachute Association Board of Directors as one of the PIA's representatives. Well, gee whiz, I don't really consider myself a pioneer of sport parachuting, but I have been jumping since 1977. And how did I get into it? Well, that's a good question, because as a kid in the 60s, I watched the program Ripcord, which, by the way, I have found online. And you can get the program Ripcord downloaded and watch the way they did it back in the 60s when they just had round parachutes. Well, I was out fishing on Galveston Bay in 1977, and I looked up and I saw an aircraft doing some rather odd things. And then I saw parachutes opening up and thought to myself, well, gee whiz, I'm a scuba diver. I know how to come to the surface from below. I wonder what it's like to come to the surface from above. So I was a graduate student at the University of Houston pursuing a PhD in chemistry at the time, and I saw what they called the Sundry School courses, where it said parachuting, first jump course, $60. And being a starving student, so to speak, I thought, well, $60, it can't be all that bad. I need to try this. And it was a 6-night event at about 2 hours a night, courtesy of Mike and Linda Smith, who were the main instructors at Spaceland Parachute Center in Lake City at the time. And I went through that course, showed them an incredible backwards arch that I could do at the time when I was young and nimble. And on November 12th, 1977, I showed up at the airport ready to make my first skydive. And it was military surplus equipment at the time, round parachutes, T-10s, 28 Lopos, and I got a T-10. And I got into this Cessna 2026 Gulf, which Mike Smith owned. It was a Cessna 182 with a jump door. And as we took off and climbed to altitude, I looked in Mike's face, looked into his eyes and said, God, am I really going to listen to this guy when he tells me to put my feet out, get out, and go? And the answer came back on high, yes. So we got up to an altitude of 2,800 feet, which was the standard exit altitude for a static line jump at that time. He opened up the door, said, put your feet out, and I put my feet out. He said, climb out. I climbed out into the proper position, and he said, go. At that point, I looked up at the wing, and I took my side step off the step of the aircraft and knew even before the parachute had opened that I found nirvana and this sport was for me. Well, I went back home that day wondering how in the world can I afford to pursue this sport. In my mailbox was an IRS refund check. I got on the phone and said, I'll be back tomorrow. I'm making more jumps. That was the start of about 3,422 jumps in my jumping career, of which, in order to pursue it, I found ways to finance it, which included packing student parachutes, taking out the garbage, organizing the trailer at the time. Eventually, I got my A license, A5806, went in to become what they called a jump master at the time within a year, continued on, got C12909 as my C license, which was 100 jumps at that time, became that jump master, eventually became an instructor, and also ended up becoming an instructor examiner, which is a person that certifies other people to instruct in the sport. In the early 80s, they came out with the accelerated freefall program, and of course, that's the next thing that I challenged and became proficient at. and the tandem program as well. I also became a tandem instructor along the way. My entire purpose of being in the sport for that many years was to make sure that there was an adequate training protocol for new students. And I've had the privilege of having trained some students that have gone on to become national champions or participated in national championship competitions. I never did that myself because my emphasis was always on having fun and training people. And I also became a jump pilot. So I got to fly the Cessna 182 after I had my 300 hours requirement for the aircraft, and eventually a Cessna 206, and I also did about 100 hours in the right seat of a Twin Otter, although I never did qualify for flying the Twin Otter by myself because of lack of training, and unfortunately Dave Boatman, who ran the Skydiving Center at the time, passed away. But I have also pursued my aviation interests, becoming a Civil Air Patrol mission pilot. Even got a second in command rating in a DC-3, what we know as a spooky gunship. All of the years that I've been jumping, I can proudly say that none of my students have ever become fatalities. But I've seen other fatalities in the sport. And the whole thing is that if you do some things smart, you won't become a fatality, unless, of course, it's an act of God. And that, of course, is something that we always have to face. But if you do some things that are stupid, you're asking to be bitten by the ground. People often ask, well, how do you make money in the skydiving industry? Well, you don't make a lot of money in the skydiving industry. As a matter of fact, the standard joke is if you want to make a lot of money in the drop zone business, start out with a lot of money and end up with less money. You're not going to make a lot of money in the business unless you're one of the big drop zones with a lot of airplanes and a big clientele. But the idea is that when you get into the sport, pursue your own passion, find that niche that makes you feel good about yourself and promotes the sport for others. I've always tried to make the sport enjoyable. Whenever I took a student up on their first jump, be it static line, accelerated freefall, or tandem, the biggest reward I get is to see the smile on their face when I've landed them safely. So here I am at the Parachute Industry Association meeting, making a record for posterity, because all of us have a finite life, and I hope to live a lot longer than this will be around. That's about it. Mike Turoff, D5957. Take care.